Hi, welcome to the Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host, I'm Pastor Chris. Thank you for joining me. The podcast is an interview show. It gives us a way to share with you some of the great people here at Shepherd of the Hills, at our church, school, and childcare. A lot of wonderful people that God has brought together in this place, including those who serve on our staff. And today I want to introduce you to one of our teachers, one of our newest teachers. Her name is April Navarro. She teaches first grade. She has a husband and 2 children. She's an alum of our school, and she also likes to go on cruises. So I told her we've got to talk about that later on. So I'd love for you to get a chance to know her better now, and it's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast April Navarro. April, welcome.
Thank you, Pastor Chris. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Tell us a little bit more about what you do. This is your first year as a full-time teacher with us.
Yes, this is my first year back at Shepherd since the class of 2000. And so I teach first grade with Miss Nicole Fencius. I have 13 kids in my class. She has 14. So we're pretty well balanced.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Now you were doing a little bit of substituting last year, right?
I did. So in 2015, I was actually teaching special ed, and I stopped because I had my daughter, Ashley. And then a couple of years later, I decided to get back into it, and I started subbing here at Shepherd. I would sub for pre-K, for first grade, and so on. And so last year, I approached Miss Gary about possibly interviewing with her because I saw that there were openings, and so she was like, yeah, we'll talk about it. And July came around and she interviewed me, and here we are.
All right. So how has the school year been so far?
So far it has been very good.
Yeah?
We've had our moments, but everything has been kind of how I expected.
Yeah?
You know, everything has its moments.
What's the biggest challenge as a first grade teacher?
So for me, it was getting over my anxiety. So if you remember at the very beginning of the school year, I was like very nervous about starting teaching again because it was going from full-time mom now into full-time teaching. You know, it wasn't part-time subbing anymore. It was just full-time. Yeah. So it was me like getting over all of those nerves, getting rid of the anxiety. Mm-hmm. And the night before school started, I think I told you how I just was so nervous. I was like, I want to quit. I can't do this. But then as soon as I drove to school that morning, it was like it just all went away. I was as calm as I could be. And I think part of it was I had done a lot of praying, just talking to myself, you're okay, you can do this. And then several teachers had sent me messages about, you got this, make today the best day. It will be the best day, really enjoy it. And so things like that, messages of encouragement, just made it so much better.
Wow, that's really cool. It makes me think of a couple of things. One is, I'm sure other people have those experiences too, where something big is happening the next day and you're just so anxious, you're like, no, I can't do this.
Yes.
And you talked about, you were saying things to yourself, you can do this, it's going to be okay.
And that's what I tell my kids in class, you are what you are. You are as smart as you are. Because a lot of them are like, I can't do this. And I tell them, God is with you. He is in your heart. You can do this. He is with you wherever you go. And that's how I feel. I'm here to serve God. I'm here to serve these children. I treat them as if they were my own kids. I love hearing about what they did on the weekend. Any experience they had, and then I tell them a little bit about my weekend, and they're all very curious. A teacher is. What does
a teacher do on the weekend?
That they don't have a bed inside the classroom. That they are actual real people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I remember as a kid how shocking it was to see one of my teachers in the grocery store. You shop at the grocery store too?
Exactly.
Yeah. Another thing that I heard you say was that people were sending you messages encouraging you. It just makes me think of the power of encouragement. And, if you ever have something you can say to someone to encourage them, say it or text it, because you never know, it might really make a difference for their day.
And it did. It was Miss Foskey and Miss Axtell. I remember both of them walking past me, and they gave me a pat on the back, and they were like, make today the best day.
Oh, cool.
And so I was determined that today was going to be the best day, no matter what happened, even if it was the most horrible day, which it wasn't. It was actually a very good day.
Yeah.
But one of those moments that you'll always remember.
Right, yeah. And this has to be very special for you because you are an alum of our school.
I am.
Yeah.
It was always my goal to get back to Shepherd, believe it or not.
That was your goal, to be a teacher at Shepherd?
Yes.
Wow. And you said you finished schooling here in 2000?
I was the class of 2000, and Miss Gary was actually my 8th grade teacher.
Yeah.
Miss Judy Friesenhahn was my 6th grade, as well as Miss Cindy Miller back when she was here.
Yeah.
Cindy Johnson, I don't know if you've ever
I've
met
heard
her.
the name.
She was 7th grade.
Yeah.
Mr. Urban was my 8th grade science teacher and technology teacher.
Yeah.
So, it's an honor for me to be working with these people that have encouraged me to be a teacher after all these years.
Wow. I mean, we're talking 2 decades later, and you were thinking, my goal is to get back to Shepherd to be a teacher there. How cool is that?
Because for me, it was always the time in my life when I loved everything about this school. I was so happy to do like the sports. I remember like going to Camp Lone Star, going to Austin, going to Houston for our 8th grade science trip, our 8th grade trip, graduation. You don't forget a lot of the memories that you make here. And so that's why I've really wanted my kids to come here and why I've wanted to come back.
Yeah, that is such a great story. And it just really speaks to the impact that the school had on your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you're one of several alum who are on staff. I mean, there are several people who went to school here. And
actually, Miss Katie Rohr and I played volleyball, I think, together. I think she was 7th grade. I was 8th grade at the time.
And now you guys are hallway buddies.
Yes, we are hallway buddies.
Yeah, how cool is that? But you finished here in 2000, and then you started teaching this year. So we're talking 2 decades. What happened in the middle of those 2 decades? Bridging your first time here and now your current time here.
So I went to John Marshall High School, just right down the road. And I actually went through a program called ECC, which was Early Childhood Curriculum, I believe. And it was teaching kids, I guess seniors in high school, what they wanted to do, if they wanted to be teachers. And I got really excited because we were going to go to a private school and a public school for a few weeks. And I found out that the private school was actually Shepherd.
Oh, okay.
And so as soon as I saw that, I was looking through the teachers, and I really wanted to be back with Mrs. Miller at the time. And so when it was my turn to come back, I remember her was teaching 3rd grade at the time, and I walked in and she gave me the biggest hug, and she was like, welcome home.
Aww.
Because that's what Shepherd is, it's home. And so I remember I was doing a fractions lesson for her, and Miss Gary walked in and she was like, look at this, it's so nice to have our alumni back, and she's going to make a good teacher one day. So I've always held on to that.
Wow, you remember her saying that?
Yes.
Yeah?
In words of encouragement.
How cool is that?
So after that, I went to college. I got my bachelor's in special education. I originally started off EC4, but in 2003, I had a niece that was born with Down syndrome. And I also have a cousin that was born with autism. So both of those are kind of what drove me to go towards special ed.
Really?
And I was just so curious to learn about it. So I went on to get my master's in special education, focusing in autism.
Focusing in autism. Okay.
And that was in 2011. So the next year, I became an instructional assistant in SAISD. So I taught at Kate Shank Elementary as their instructional assistant. It really gave me like an eye-opening experience because I saw how hard instructional assistants truly work. They work just as hard as the teachers do.
I bet.
So next year after that, I became what was called the TLC, the Total Learning Curriculum Teacher for Kelly Elementary and SAISD.
Okay.
And I taught for 2 years until I had Ashley.
Okay.
And then 6 years later, here we are. So I became the 1st grade teacher for Shepherd.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to kind of just get a change, not in scenery, but change in environment, we can say.
Yeah. Now I'm curious about your work and your study with autism. You spent a lot of time thinking about how best to teach and to care for the student. What were some of the big takeaways of how do you help a student with autism?
Patience.
Patience?
A lot of people have told me, you must be the most patient person in the world.
Okay.
And for me, it really wasn't a job because you learn to love these kids. You know, I had between 6 and 10 kids at a time in my unit. And, you know, a lot of people, they were like, oh, you teach those. But for me, it was like a challenge. It was something I really wanted to do. And, you know, I went to a lot of classes to learn, you know, about direct instruction and to learn about the spectrum, as they called it.
Right, yeah.
You know, you have the children with Asperger's and you have like the high functioning, low functioning.
Yeah.
And mine, a lot of times, were more behavior than they were anything else. They were very capable. They were still very smart. And I treated them just like any other kid that would be in my first grade class.
Sure.
And I think that's what's important, is to make sure they are treated the exact same. You know, and I would do the home visits, so I'd see the environments of where these kids grew up.
Okay.
And we would do, you know, the ARD meetings, the admission review and dismissal. And, you know, working with these parents, it was just important to really see what we could do to make these kids successful.
Now, you talked working with the kids, patience is important. What about working with parents of children with autism? What did you learn about how best to work with their parents?
The parents was a little more challenging, believe it or not, because a lot of times I could never get a hold of the parents.
Okay.
And so it was me kind of feeling like the parent, like what would be the best decision if I was this child's parent? What would I do? And so that's why I say a lot of times I had to just go over the phone or do some kind of a conference with them just to get their input.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was a lot to fight for them to get speech services or any kind of services for these kids. I had one boy, he was afraid of getting a haircut. And so the parents would actually come to me and ask, where can I get one? And so we had a teacher on staff that actually was really good at working with children with autism and giving a haircut.
Okay.
As interesting as that sounds.
Well, you know, it sounds like a haircut, that's not a big thing, but it was a really big thing because it was overcoming something for the child. It was, you know,
it was that fear.
Being resourceful.
It was the fear of it.
Yeah, the fear of it. Yeah. So what was the trick to getting the haircut done with that child?
So even with my little boy is actually very terrified of haircuts. He screams, he cries. And so what we do is we read him like a social story. It goes like page by page, like first we do this, and then we show him the picture. And then as we get further along in the story, I take out the clippers and I let him hold it. First turned off, and then we turn it on, and so that he can feel that vibration. Because it's all about the sensory with a lot of these kids.
Huh.
They're very sensor sensitive.
Okay. So you progress through a book or a story, and
the social story, yes.
As you get to each part, then you do
take
a little
out
bit
each
more.
Part.
Interesting.
It's like a stair-step process, I guess you can say.
Well, there's the patience part, right? You don't just jump right into it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I figured that's what would help me with first grade, is being the patient part.
Absolutely. Yeah. Patience. In your work with students with autism, are there any other stories that stand out to you, just students that were really special to you, or you really saw them make a lot of progress?
I do. I actually have one that I worked with him. He actually wasn't a child with autism, but he had a reading disability. And he was very, very shy. So it took a lot for him to warm up to me. But he would come to me various times in the day because the teacher's like, I can't deal with his behavior. You need to take him. And so I was kind of like that go-to person for those behaviors. And so he and we would sit down one-on-one, and we just slowly, I would come up with like games or activities. And little by little, you know, he was starting to read. And so I would send him back once reading was over. And the teacher came to me one day and she was like, Miss Navarro, his grades. And I was like, are they worse? And she's like, no, he's like one of the best ones in the class. And I was like, really? you know, because I never saw him actually doing the assignments. I just pulled him for that reading part, you know, and he would sit and work with my kids during the day. Because I taught something called unique learning systems. And what it was is it was geared, it was a leveled reading for children with autism or disabilities.
Okay.
And so it was like, first one is very, very simple reading, like maybe 1 or 2 sentences. The second one was a little bit more difficult. And then the third one looked more like what second grade would read, more paragraphs, more sentences. So I started him kind of with that. And at the end, the parents were coming up to me and thanking me for helping him read. And I was like, wow, you know, little things like that made such an impact.
Absolutely, to help a
So
child
even
read.
teaching special ed, I could still, you know, manage to teach a child that was general ed
Yeah.
and really work around it to
Yeah.
make it work for him.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of things that you learned in your training and experience that you can implement in whatever level of teaching
Yes,
you're doing,
absolutely,
right? Yeah.
absolutely.
So what have been some of your favorite moments or greatest joys so far in teaching first grade this year?
My favorite day of the week, and my kids will tell you, is Wednesday.
Wednesday.
I love chapel.
Oh, yeah.
Chapel is actually my most favorite thing about Shepherd.
Oh,
I like watching the kids in the church. If you watch, they are so into chapel.
they are, yeah.
Watching Miss White up front doing the hand signals, and
Yeah.
you look around and you see all these kids doing it.
Yeah.
To me, that is just, wow.
It's cool, isn't it?
It's very, very cool.
Yeah.
I love teaching religion and I love teaching math.
Uh-huh.
And watching my kids they'll be at childcare, and I'll hear them singing some of the songs that I sing during class, because we've been learning about addition. So I did something called the doubles rap.
Okay.
And so they were watching me pretend that I knew how to rap, sing.
Oh, that
About
must have been fun
doubles.
to watch.
It was probably very embarrassing for me, but you know, as a teacher, you don't care if they are engaged, if they are learning. It doesn't matter how silly I look,
Right.
because I figure they are learning in that moment.
Yeah. Whatever works. And they love you more for it, too, if they see that their teacher's willing to let loose.
To be silly, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't mind being silly if it's helping them learn, by all means.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, since we're talking about fun things, we got to talk about cruises.
Absolutely.
All right. So you've been on 33 cruises.
I had to go back and count how many officially, but yes.
What's the most cruises you've done in 1 year?
Actually, I think about 4.
You've done 4 in a year.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. And I've
The
been on
the longest one was a 12-day
12-day cruise?
in Europe,
in Europe. Wow. That sounds
Oh.
extraordinary.
all the way down to just a 3-day.
Uh-huh.
I know it sounds like just a 3-day, but
Yeah.
there's still a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We did a Disney cruise line out of for 3 days.
Uh-huh.
We did Royal Caribbean, and we've done Carnival. The Carnival was the week-long one in Venice.
Wow.
Most magical place I can honestly think I've ever seen.
Really? Venice?
Venice,
Yeah.
yes. Because if you think about this city, and it's, you know, surrounded by water,
Yeah, the canals. Yeah.
and then you see this massive cruise ship going down this canal, and you're like, wow.
That had to
It's
be a
pretty
big
much-
canal.
Yes, and it was like towering over all of these buildings.
Yeah.
You know, and you see people coming out and they're just staring at it like, what is that?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, what a scene. How did you get started in cruises?
So my dad loves to travel.
Okay.
And he would always take us to Disney World. He would always take us on car rides, road trips.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually he saw cruising, and he was like, you know, we should try that. So in 1998, we went on our first cruise. It was on a Carnival ship, and we just went to Nassau, Bahamas.
Uh-huh.
And we just, as a family, really enjoyed it. I went with my mom and dad, my brother, and myself.
Uh-huh.
And after that, we started going on more and more. And then it was almost like a competition. We were trying to see if we can get on all the different ships.
Yeah.
Because every ship is so different.
Right,
They're
yeah.
all themed differently.
Mm-hmm.
And then my husband was like, well, we need to try another cruise line. And so we decided to go Royal Caribbean. This was after already going on Carnival for 27 cruises. And then we switched over to Royal Caribbean. I was like, I don't know about this. And then we ended up liking it a lot.
Yeah. Those are the two main ones, right? Carnival and Royal Caribbean?
And we have done 2 Disney cruise lines.
And Disney. Okay. Okay. Married on a cruise?
No, I was actually married in Disney World.
In Disney World?
Yes.
Where in Disney World?
So they have a wedding pavilion right outside one of the hotels, the Grand Floridian. And so my husband knows I am a very big Disney fanatic.
Oh.
And so I was like, what do you think about this? And he was like, whatever makes you happy. And I was like, okay, well then that's what we were doing. So we did something called an escape wedding. So it was only 20 people. And we got married and then had the reception there. And then they gave us season tickets for at least a year after that.
Oh my goodness.
So obviously you could see I made him go again.
Yeah. Wow. Married at Disney World. You're a big Disney fan.
Yes.
Favorite Disney movie?
Favorite Disney movie? I actually love The Lion King.
Lion King. Great music, right?
But Beauty and the Beast is my favorite princess. I love Belle.
All right. What about the older Disney movies?
The older Disney movies? Yeah. I actually like Ichabod Crane, The Wind in the Willows, Mr. Toad.
Oh, you don't see that one as much.
No, and it's this time of the year, and I was thinking if I had time, I might show bits and pieces to my class because I'm sure none of them really know about it.
Yeah, I don't know that my kids know about that, and we watched a lot of Disney movies.
And I love that for this time of the year especially. Yeah. I always have a group of movies that I pull out.
Yeah.
So like right at Thanksgiving, I pull out every single Christmas movie we have, and I will sit there and I will make Ashley and Andrew watch them with me while we put up the Christmas.
Make them watch it.
Yes, I do. I make them watch it, whether they want to or not.
That's good. That's called parenting.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, let's go back to the cruises. So a Disney cruise. I've been on one cruise. It was a Carnival. What's a Disney cruise like?
Disney has a lot of characters, as you can imagine. Yeah. So they have Mickey Mouse, the princesses. But what was most unusual about that cruise line is they actually have fireworks that launch from the ship.
Oh, fun.
So we went to Nassau, and then they pulled away from Nassau, and they did Pirates of the Caribbean, but they called it something else. I don't really remember what.
Okay.
And they would do like a whole show. They'd have Captain Jack Sparrow, all of that. And all of a sudden these fireworks would be going off and you're like, what is this noise? And then you're like, oh, that's so cool.
It's the cannons.
No other cruise line actually does fireworks at sea.
Yeah.
So it was just like, wow.
Wow, that's spectacular.
And they also have a water slide. They call it the Aqueduct. Most cool thing ever. If you've ever been to like Schlitterbahn and they have the one that's like a water roller coaster, it's like that on the side of the boat.
Okay. Now on all these 33 cruises, have you ever had one that was just a real disaster? It did not go well?
I actually have.
Oh, let's hear about it.
Well, I don't know how appropriate a lot of it is, though. We just had a lot of family arguments on this cruise.
Okay.
And just a lot of things that just didn't seem to go right. Like we went on an excursion, and the excursion, somewhere in that time frame, the cruise ship actually ended up leaving and moving to another pier.
Oh, and they left you behind.
And so they got us there, right? They did leave people behind, but it was like, what is going on? It was in Puerto Vallarta. And so since we've never been back, to say the least.
Traumatized.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we left out of Long Beach, California. And it was a 7-day cruise. And I remember we had to make an emergency stop because a passenger had gotten sick. And so they had to come and get that passenger. And then we continued along. So this was kind of like, okay, there's just too much stuff going on this cruise.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like there's a theme here.
There's a theme. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about the cruise I went on was the food.
Endless amounts of food.
Endless food, yeah.
Ice cream.
Yeah. That's really fun.
My brother and I would actually have competitions to see how many ice cream cones we could eat. It's very embarrassing, but I think I managed to eat about 18 on one cruise. Yeah, but it was a week.
Oh, okay. Well, Okay, that's still a great accomplishment.
Yes, I still love to eat, and that was the nice thing about the Disney cruise is they had food that you see in the theme parks, and it was like, wow, they have the Mickey bars here. I'm gonna get that.
Yeah.
You know, Ghirardelli chocolates on your pillow. You know, magical things.
Yeah, that sounds great. Now, are you planning for a next one? I know COVID really shut the cruise industry down for a while. So do you have one in mind that you want to do in the future?
I would like to go back to Alaska.
Okay.
I'm hoping maybe if things are a little bit more under control, maybe next year we could maybe do Alaska. Or my family absolutely loves the Royal Caribbean Oasis of the Sea class boats.
Okay.
They are some of the biggest ones in the world. They have carousels on them. They have zip lining, surfing, rock climbing. You would never expect for a cruise ship. And so we've done several in the Eastern Caribbean. I heard Galveston is actually going to get one.
Oh.
So I might hold out for that one.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then just to change topics, I'd love to just talk a little bit about your faith and what your faith means to you, especially, you are here at a Christian school leading children, not just in learning the subjects, but also learning about God. So how does your faith motivate you? How does your faith lead you in your life?
So every day, that is actually one of the subjects I love talking about the most. And, I came here as a student, and so, you remember a lot of the stories that are taught, but it's so nice to be able to go back and reflect on the stories that I teach the kids, and watching their expressions, like as you're telling the story, like of Noah's Ark, for example. And so for me, it's a blessing to be able to teach them what I know and express it. So for me, I'm an Episcopalian. I was born and raised, and so over the past year, it's been kind of hard to go to church. So I still watch live stream. I actually watch you occasionally too on Saturday nights.
Okay.
But it's important for me to really bring up in my children their faith, that they know and love God. Because I feel like a lot of things that have happened in the world today is because there's so many people that don't know God. And I think for me, that's one of my main things, is that I know Him. I'm able to praise Him as often as I can. And that's the other reason I wanted to come back to Shepherd, is like in public school, you are hushed. You are not allowed to talk about God. And it's so hard for me because I want to show how excited I am to learn about Him. And that's why I love chapel, I think, so much, because we are here to praise Him. And that's what I love.
Yeah, that's great. And I know the kids can see that. It really starts with us as leaders setting that example and having a heart for God, and then they see that and they want some of that in their own lives.
Just like last week, we were talking about the Jordan River, and I think it was Israel crosses the Jordan. And I showed them a bunch of pictures of places around the world. And I said, now this one is the Jordan River. And they were like, oh yeah, that's that story you talked about last week. I said, yeah, where the priests, what did they do? They stood in the water. And then what happened? The water stopped, and it was nice for them to be able to actually see those images of what it really looks like. Because, we can only create so much in our head.
Yeah.
But for them to actually see an image of like, okay, this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
So they asked me about the Red Sea, so we did a Google search on the Red Sea, because they were convinced it just looked like red water.
The Red Sea.
Exactly. And so I was like, no, it actually looks like this. And so they were like, wow. And so it's seeing that in them that really encourages you to continue along with what you do.
Yeah.
So I love seeing their expressions and like, oh, okay, I finally get it. I see this.
Yeah, sure.
And one of their first things is like, when I ask them a question is like, would God be happy with this choice? And if they say no, they realize, hey, I need to change my behavior. And so I really try to instill that in them.
Yeah. It's a great framework to approach things from.
Yes.
What would God think?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I know the Lord's working through you in great ways, and your story is such a great story of someone who was here as a student, now is back as a teacher, and that was something that you really wanted for your life.
Absolutely.
And now it's happening. So
Yes. Plan to be here for many more years.
excellent. Excellent. Well, God's blessings to you and your teaching and leading our little ones in faith and in learning. And hope you continue to have a great school year.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching and listening to our podcast today and getting to know more about April. Please join us next time as we continue to introduce you to people here at Shepherd of the Hills so you can get to know them better. And until then, the Lord's blessings to you. May He keep you healthy and safe and strong. The peace of the Lord be with you today.